Alright, so a lot of people are confused about the Culling game, and honestly, that's fair, because the anime doesn't actually explain how Kenjaku created it. It kind of just drops you into the middle of it. So in this video, I'm going to break down using only what the manga actually states, and how Kenjaku built the Culling game, how it was activated, and why stopping him was never as simple as just killing him. The reason this question keeps coming up is because most explanations focus on the rules of the Culling game, not its construction. We get told what players can and can't do, how points work, and how colonies function. But the manga spreads the explanation of how this entire system was created across multiple arcs and conversations. So if it feels like you missed something, you didn't. The information is there, it's just fragmented. And once you connect it, the Culling game stops looking like a chaotic battle royale and starts looking like a crazy engineered system. So before the Culling game could exist, Kenjaku needed participants, and the manga is very clear that these participants were not random. At the end of the Shibuya incident, Kenjaku explains that he used idol transfiguration on two distinct groups of people he had already marked in advance. The first group consisted of non-sorcerers who possessed the latent potential to use cursed techniques, but whose brains needed to be adjusted to do so. The second group consisted of humans who had already ingested cursed objects and were prepared as vessels for the reincarnated sorcerers from the past. When Kenjaku activated idol transfiguration, both groups were triggered at the same time, instantly creating a massive pool of players. That activation hinges entirely on Mahito's cursed technique, which is idol transfiguration. In the manga explicitly explains how Kenjaku obtained it. After absorbing Mahito using cursed spirit manipulation, Kenjaku activates maximum Uzumaki, and it is revealed that Uzumaki can extract a cursed technique from a cursed spirit, not just recycle their cursed energy. Kenjaku uses this function to extract idol transfiguration and later uses it himself. This is why Mahito's growth and evolution mattered, because Kenjaku was not grooming a successor, he was cultivating a technique. And once Mahito had served that purpose, Kenjaku took it. Also, the reincarnated sorcerers that appear in the Culling game were not spontaneously created when the game began. Kenjaku had been making binding vows with sorcerers from the past, turning them into cursed objects, and arranging for those objects to be ingested by modern humans capable as serving as vessels. And when idol transfiguration was activated, those sorcerers reincarnated immediately, meaning the Culling Games roster had been assembled long before the first colony appeared. The manga presents this not as a coincidence, but as preparation. So with the players established, the next requirement was a space where the game could function. And the manga explains that the Culling game takes place across multiple colonies formed by barrier techniques spread throughout Japan. These barriers are not just walls, they create enclosed environments where participation is enforced and the rules apply. Barrier techniques are fundamental to Jujutsu society, and the scale of those colonies shows that the Culling game is operating on a structural level far beyond a normal curse, effectively partitioning the country into controlled zones. And when Yuji and the others meet Tengen, the nature of the Culling game becomes clear. Tengen explains that the Culling game is a ritual that uses the participants and the barrier boundaries to convey human beings to the other side, setting the conditions necessary for Kenjaku's ultimate goal, the merging of humanity with Tengen. This explanation reframes the entire event. The fighting is not the purpose of the game, it's the mechanism through which cursed energy and the conditions are generated to sustain the ritual. And one of the most critical revelations is that Kenjaku is not the game master of the Culling game. Through binding vows, he structured the system so that it operates independently of his direct control. Tengen states that even if Kenjaku were killed, the Culling game would not automatically end, and participants are forced to continue playing under penalty of death if they refuse. By the time sorcerers understand how the system works, it is already running on its own, which makes it so difficult to stop. Every participant in the Culling game is assigned a Shikigami known as Kogame, which explains the rules, tracks points, confirms participation, and facilitates communication related to rule changes. Kogame functions as an interface, allowing the game to manage itself without Kenjaku needing to actively oversee it. This is why the Culling game feels less like an event being controlled by a villain and more like a machine that has already been set into motion. Putting everything together, the manga shows that Kenjaku created the Culling game by extracting idol transfiguration from Mahito using maximum Uzumaki, then using that technique to awaken curse techniques and trigger reincarnation in humans he had already prepared. He populated the game with modern sorcerers and reincarnated ones through cursed objects. And Binding Vow structured the battlefield using barrier colonies across Japan, and reinforced the entire system with binding vows that removed him as the game master. And Kogane serves as an automated interface that allows the system to continue functioning without his constant involvement. That's why the most dangerous thing about Kenjaku isn't his raw strength, it's his preparation. The Culling game wasn't created with permission, and it wasn't announced, it was engineered. By the time anyone realized what was happening, the system was already active and everyone was forced to participate. And yeah, before anyone says it, I know I struggle with saying the word sorcerer, but we're getting there. At the end of the day, the important part is understanding what's actually happening in the story. And if this breakdown helped clear things up or answered questions you've had about the Culling games, I'm glad. And thank you for watching. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment if you want a follow-up on Kenjaku's end goal.